Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another episode of In the Frame. Today I'm going to talk about the most important box set of the year. No hyperbole there, of course. Recently I showed off the imprint Powell and Pressburger box set, which is, as far as quality, the best box set of the year so far. But this box set I'm going to talk about today is due out on the 15th of September from Eureka, and it really is an amazing and important piece of work. This is the Wrack and Ruin Rubble films at DEFA, which is the German film studio. It's 5 films. The Murderers Are Among Us, Somewhere in Berlin, Police Raid, Marriage in the Shadows, and The Blum Affair. Now these are films which were made in 1946, 1947. I suppose they were made in 1945 to 1948, but as far as release. So we've got 84 minutes, 83 minutes, 94 minutes, 102 minutes, and 111 minutes. There's a bunch of extras as well. And these are, it's amazing that we have them. And this is kind of, that's the back of the box. Again, another beautiful looking box. It's amazing that we have them, considering they were made right after the war by Germany. Obviously the war didn't go Germany's way. I don't know whether you've heard that or not. But this set is amazing, and sadly, as we know, still relevant today. So also Roberto Rossellini did Germany Year Zero right after the war, which is an amazing film in itself. But when they talk about the Rubble film at DEFA, it is exactly that. The cities in rubble, strangely enough, after the Allied bombings. And these are incredible films. Again, because they are, it's just out literally in the next day or so. I'm not going to go into detail about these films, but it's more just a message of you really need to buy this set. Obviously I don't work for Eureka, more's the pity, and Eureka does kind of get overlooked sometimes because they don't release, you know, the largest number of films. Perhaps some of their releases, you know, aren't the flashiest. Generally films that certainly for the most part I haven't heard of. You know, I've never heard of these 5 films, but they're just so important from a historical point of view. So if you're interested in your history, let alone, you know, real world history, apart from just film history, this set is absolutely mind-blowing. So I have 2 Amare cases. The Murderers Among Us is absolutely fantastic. That gets its own disc. And this has a commentary by crime cinema expert Sergio Angelini. It has a commentary on Somewhere in Berlin by East German cinema scholar Elizabeth Ward. There's a new commentary on Police Raid by crime expert Sergio Angelini. A new commentary on Marriage in the Shadows by DEFA historian Sean Allen. A new commentary on The Blum Affair written by Roland Mann and presented by David Melville Wingrove. So all 5 of these films have new commentaries, which I've still to listen to, but I certainly will be doing, because this is obviously a fascinating period. From the Rubble, a new interview with socialist cinema expert Claire Knight on the founding of DEFA and its early productions. Confronting the Past, a new interview with Jewish studies scholar Sue Weiss on Marriage in the Shadows and The Blum Affair, which is an absolutely brilliant piece. Crime Wave, a new video essay by DEFA historian Sebastian Hajduski on police raid. There's an alternate ending for Somewhere in Berlin. Rebuilding Berlin from 1946, which is a DEFA documentary on the post-war rebuilding of Berlin, which is fantastic. Rebuilding Potsdam, 1946, which is a DEFA documentary on post-war rebuilding of Potsdam. A slightly tougher one is Death Camp Sachsenhausen from 1946, the DEFA documentary on the Holocaust in Sachsenhausen concentration camp, which is, as Sue Weiss says, might have been an inspiration for Alain Rennie with Night and Fog. I mean, it's a 37-minute documentary, but it's absolutely bring tears to a glass eye. And again, one of the important things about this set is there's a lot of world leaders that should really watch these films and watch these extras, but of course they won't. But they really ought to, because it's an absolute disgrace. I'm sure if you showed an alien the Death Camp Sachsenhausen documentary, the alien would go, but surely after this human beings didn't hurt themselves or hurt each other again. Yeah, look at the news. The Eyewitness, 1946, 01 archival newsreel featuring DEFA's first animation, Underground Scare. And then we've got 2 more newsreels featuring a report on the making of Murder Among Us, and an archival newsreel featuring a report on the making of Marriage in the Shadows, and again the 60-page book. So the extras are just, again, sobering isn't the right word. So Marriage in the Shadows and the Blum Affair, and again there's reverse artwork for Somewhere in Berlin and the police raid. So we get the second disc is Somewhere in Berlin and Police Raid, and the third disc is Marriage in the Shadows and the Blum Affair. Now these films each kind of have their own little unique spin on post-war, literally right after the war, and kind of occupation. So the Murderers Among Us, Marriage in the Shadows and the Blum Affair, I would say, are all absolutely excellent. Somewhere in Berlin and the Police Raid are still very good, but the other 3 are really outstanding, I would say. But again, as a package, this is the most important box set of the year. I mean, this is just, it's a stunning piece of work. So again, I'm not going to go into every detail of the films. The Murderers Among Us, as I said, is one of the best out of the 5. And that's about a woman who comes back from a camp and back to an apartment, but realises there's this kind of alcoholic doctor in the apartment as well, which obviously causes lots of gossip when she decides to let him stay. But he was a doctor in the army, and he's pretty much racked by guilt and shame. And there's another civilian who used to be an officer that the doctor served under, who isn't really racked by guilt and shame and has kind of landed on his feet. And there's that kind of power dynamic. And again, that's all I'm going to say about it, but it's absolutely wonderful. I mean, the restorations in these are fantastic. I mean, I think it's the Blum Affair, for example, the original film is gone, so they had to kind of restore it from a composite, and like, so I mean, it's an amazing work just to actually be able to see these films in such a beautiful condition. As you'd expect from German cinema, the cinematography is beautiful. The use of shadows, obviously there's lots of shadows and lots of rubble about, and it is used in a very wonderful way. I mean, none of these films are directed by famous directors, but again, unfortunately there's lots of films by them that you could perhaps investigate rabbit holes. So The Murders Among Us is absolutely fantastic. As I said, Somewhere in Berlin and Police Raid are perhaps a notch down from the other three, but they are more about the black market. Police Raid is a fairly obvious title, but again, it's about people trying to survive post-war, even if they have to bend the law and bend the rules. So certainly Police Raid is more kind of genre specific, with less kind of socio-political undertones, but it's still highly enjoyable, as is Somewhere in Berlin, which is probably the closest to Germany Year Zero in the fact that it does kind of focus on some young boys, and obviously you've got that, the soldiers coming back from the war and being defeated, and then you've got these young kind of groups of young boys playing war, which, as we all know, war isn't a game. So again, Somewhere in Berlin, Police Raid, perhaps not as deep, but still has moments of brutality and horror, which is what we want to see. And then the final two, Marriage in the Shadows and The Blum Affair, are kind of fascinating because these are set pre-war, but Hitler is in power and society is sensing a change. Now, Marriage in the Shadows is based on a true story of an actor who wasn't a Jew, but his wife was a Jew, and then a friend of theirs who is given a job by the authorities to find the mixed marriages, and he protects them for a while, but eventually there's only so there's only so much time that he can kind of protect them, and it's that balance of, because it's kind of set in the artistic world, and they were at times kind of the last people to be kind of looked at, and again it's the guilt and the shame of, and the guy who's trying to protect them thinking that he's doing a good job because of protecting two or three people, and again it's also the artistic community who's, because they kind of hold themselves up as being kind of better than normal people, how they kind of let it happen, and then of course it's too late. It's like Mr. Klein, Joseph Losey film Alain Delon. By the time Alain Delon realises what's going on, he's so caught up in his own little world, he doesn't actually realise what's going on around him, and he's too late to do anything about it. Marriage in the Shadows apparently was a big hit when it came out in Germany, but once the film was finished, people just sat in their seats kind of stunned, which was a similar reaction to I had after I watched that documentary on the death camp. You just kind of sit there. But Marriage in the Shadows is wonderful. It's completely brutal, especially the ending, but again it shows a part kind of the pre-war, but they could see where things were heading if you were a Jew, even if you're married to a non-Jew. And then The Blum Affair is more of a police procedural, about the framing of a Jewish businessman, and how the police and the authorities and the judges kind of get on the bandwagon because he's a Jew, so he must be guilty, before actually kind of working out the actual facts of the case. And again, I'm not going to go into detail, but again, it's another wonderful film, shot beautifully, acted really well, and it gives you a window into that kind of finger pointing and people trying to save their own skin by pointing the finger at their neighbours and their friends. I mean, as I said, this is, hopefully this sells out, because that means people are buying it. Because again, from a, you know, we talk about film collections being, you know, people curating their collection and kind of keeping part of film history alive, and that's what you'd be doing by buying this set, because it's a fascinating period in German cinema, obviously, and a period in human history, as well as German film history. But the extras are amazing. Again, I need to go back and listen to the commentaries. So this is a set that I'll be revisiting several times. Just an amazing accomplishment by Eureka, and in partnership with DEFA. But a wonderful, wonderful set. And as I said, I don't get paid by Eureka, but I would highly recommend picking this up. I don't know whether, I'm sure they'll release standard editions as well. But if you're interested in your history and your film history, your European film history, the Wrack and Ruin set from Eureka is an absolute must, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So thanks very much for watching. Please let me know if you've heard any of these films. I'm sure you're all far more educated than I am, because I hadn't heard of any of them. Let me know what your favourite one is, and hopefully you'll join me again for more episodes of In the Frame. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.